Welcome to your Thursday afternoon Never Is Now session, Black-Jewish Relations in 2020, Navigating a Changing World. I'm Shira Goodman, Philadelphia region. This session will be in two parts. Part one is a conversation between me and Urban League of Philadelphia President and CEO Andrea Custis. Part two will be a panel discussion moderated by Rabbi Isaiah Rothstein. Andrea, you and I have been working together for a while now, both in general, through our organizations, through the Black-Jewish Alliance of the ADL, and through the new partnership that we were privileged to pilot in Philadelphia. I'm proud to call you my good friend and so grateful for your partnership and support as we've gone through some tough times in Philadelphia.
We absolutely have. And we survived all of them.
We did. What did you think when Mark Boreal, the president and CEO of the National Urban League, called to say that you and I would be starting this partnership and piloting it here in Philadelphia?
Shira, my first reaction was not surprise. I absolutely believe that if he were to pick an affiliate throughout the 90 affiliates in the United States of America, why wouldn't he pick Philadelphia when you and I already had a relationship? We were already working together. I think the time that he came to us, he and Jonathan, was right around the time that anti-Semitic comments and racist comments were made by the NAACP. So we were already working together. We worked together through the Black-Jewish Alliance. So we were not new to each other. We had already started this journey and working together. So to me, it made a just wonderful decision and a very easy decision to start in Philadelphia. And then from there, he is moving that out to other affiliates.
I agree. When Jonathan Greenblatt, our CEO, called me, I was so excited because you and I had already been working together for months on lots of things. And I knew that it was going to be really fun and exciting and really important. Right away, the first conversation you and I had, we talked about involving our young leaders and focusing on voting. It took minutes, maybe, at the most.
It really did take minutes, Shira. No, seriously, I think it was less than a minute. We both knew exactly what we wanted to do. We were on the same page. We could finish each other's sentences.
So how do you think it turned out?
Oh, my gosh. Now, this one, I would say it exceeded my expectations. And I have extremely high expectations for all the work that we did in the Urban League and with other partners.
That what we had decided was Mark and Jonathan had this relationship, you and I had this relationship, but to keep these relationships growing and our communities working together, it wasn't just one-on-one. It had to be broader. And we decided to do that not just through people kind of breaking bread together, but actually doing the work. And I think that is what is going to form these long-lasting partnerships and relationships when the ADL is going to be there for the Urban League and vice versa. And our communities are going to be there to stand together against injustice, against hatred, against any challenge that we face.
And Shira, when you look at that, I always say you learn a lot about who you are from your history. So when we go all the way back and we look at the civil rights movement, think about the Jewish folks that marched with the Black civil rights leaders. Think about the Jewish folks that were there in the back room working on the legal pieces that we needed in order to demand rights and to get the things that we needed. So we have a long history of African Americans and Jewish folks working together on civil rights, on social justice, on racial justice. So it's a natural flow to where we are today. This is not new work. We have a history of working together. And I will absolutely say to you, there is no doubt in my mind that that history will continue as we go forward. And we will decide on what are those issues that we have in common that we want to work on. Like, is education important to us in America? Is housing important to us? You know, we're not finished with all the work that we have on economic empowerment, on moving people from poverty to prosperity, right? We did it this time with the voting. We said go from protest to power, the power of your voice at the polls, right? The power of your voice in your mail-in ballot. And so I don't even think we've begun to scratch even the surface of how much more work that we have to do and that we will do together.
I think that's right. And I think the history that you're talking about is something I know we're very proud of, but you and I have talked about that we have to keep creating that in the present and the future. We have to keep building that. We can't kind of rest on that history. We can be proud of it, and it should fuel us to be working into the future. And I know that we've talked this year about the disparate impact of COVID on Black and brown communities, especially in our community in Philadelphia. And I know the work the Urban League of Philadelphia is doing, and we've tried to shine a light on that and make sure people understand that and understand why and what is the systemic racism that has led to that disparate impact. And I think having those conversations and bringing people to the table to hear those voices has been really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that I would absolutely like to talk about later as we do the work is what are those top 3 priorities for ADL and what are those top 3 priorities for the Urban League so that we can see where that occurs and we almost will know exactly what we need to work on. And I especially want to hear from those young professionals that are associated with ADL and associated with the Urban League, because I think they are intuitive. I think they're very clear about what change looks like. They're clear about the direction that they want to take. So I would absolutely welcome, as others watch this and watch the second part, that they give you and I feedback. It would be so great if we were able to get that feedback from those folks that will be viewing this.
I think that's right. And I think, again, starting with the voting, we knew that was going to energize people and empower people, but be a launch pad for what we could do in the future. And I know that in St. Louis and Houston and Chicago, the ADL and Urban League affiliates are working together and beginning to start those conversations. And they're not all focusing just on voting. They're doing other things together because a lot of our priorities about empowerment and fighting for justice naturally overlap and make natural collaborations. But I think you're right. We're excited to hear from our young leaders. What do they want to do next together? How can we continue to support each other?
Right. Shira, do you remember all of the different webinars or Zoom calls that we had for the public? Can you talk about just a few of those? Because I was just looking and I'm like, oh, okay, there was something with Wharton. Oh, okay, there was something. Do you remember? I don't even remember all of them. We did quite a few.
We did one with the Wharton alumni. They wanted to do something on National Voter Registration Day, so we did that. The young leaders were on that. We did one with the Pennsylvania Department of State and the Governor's Commission on African American Affairs, a statewide webinar to talk about how to vote. And we had somebody from the Department of State who was talking about all the different ways you could do it. We did the podcast with the Sixers. We did Souls to the Polls right before Election Day with faith leaders.
Can you tell everybody about that? I'm going to do like this because I got big kudos from folks. First of all, I love the title, Souls to the Polls. So tell them about the different groups that were involved. And I felt so good that day when I literally looked at that screen and I saw the diversity and the love and everyone was on the same mission. So can you tell them a little bit about Souls to the Polls?
Sure. So, and remember that both the Urban League and the ADL are 501c3 organizations. So all this work that we're talking about was nonpartisan, was really just geared to get people to register to vote and to vote, not about who to vote for, any of that. So this was right before Election Day, the Friday before Election Day. The Urban League and Senator Vince Hughes, who's one of our state senators, he's actually my state senator, called together this a gathering of clergy, rabbis, imams, ministers, to talk about why voting really was a sacred act. Andrea called and invited the ADL. We got a couple rabbis, Rabbi Annie Lewis, Rabbi Greg Marks, and along with the ministers and the imams, people just were fired up. It finished with Reverend Jesse Jackson talking again about how this is holy work to vote, to make your voice heard. I thought I was really excited and fired up after that.
Just a footnote, Rabbi Annie The only thing I can tell you is I closed my eyes and I put my head down when I'm going to say that she was preaching. When she absolutely gave her words, I talked to other people afterwards and we were like, done, amazing. She touched our hearts, and just thankful for everybody that came on. And also people had an opportunity to tell us what they were doing in voting. So we were able to showcase what some of the ministers were doing. But I just thought it absolutely was a unified moment, like you said, from all of us, that let's just hear your voice. We're not telling you who to vote for, but we do need to hear your voice. And I thought that went extremely well. I was very happy with the turnout.
So do you have any closing words that you want to share about this partnership and what we're doing?
Yeah, from my heart, and I'm not going to cry because I get real sentimental on things like that. Shira, I want to thank you for your leadership. I want to thank you for the kindness and the care and the love that you exude. I want to thank you for caring about all people and making a difference and getting out there, rolling your sleeves up, showing up, showing out, speaking up, speaking out. It has been a pleasure, and it will continue to be a pleasure. And we also had some happy, funny moments too. Let's not forget those where sometimes you just sit there and you're like, what? And you're laughing. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being a kind, generous, loving person. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It has been my great honor to get to work with you and know you. And I really do believe that the examples from Mark and Jonathan, from you and me, will translate to our young leaders, and they will just carry this forward. So thank you for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation. This is what we do all the time. If you could listen in. So I'm glad you got to be with us for a few minutes. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Rabbi Isaiah Rothstein, Rabbinic scholar and public affairs advocate of the Jewish Federations of North America. He will be moderating the next segment of this important conversation.
Shalom. Wow. Thank you both for sharing your inspiring words about your journey and the light that you bring into the world. And friends, thank you for joining us today for this important conversation titled Black-Jewish Relations in 2020, Navigating a Changing World. And this is a part of ADL's Never Is Now Summit, the world's largest summit on anti-Semitism and hate. As Shira mentioned, my name is Rabbi Isaiah Rothstein, and I serve as Rabbinic scholar and public affairs advisor at Jewish Federations of North America. I'm currently tuning in from my apartment in Harlem. Jewish Federations of North America proudly represent 146 independent federations and also a network of 300 smaller communities across the continent. Our mission is to protect and enhance the well-being of Jews worldwide through meaningful contributions to community, Israel, and civil society. And as we begin today's discussion, I want to thank first the ADL, our co-centennialists, being around for a century, supporting a thriving Jewish community and civil society, making sure that where we live and our neighbors and who we are supported, making sure that the most vulnerable are safe and secure. And I want to thank the ADL for really combating hate, promoting dialogue and understanding, and fostering unity during a time, especially like today, of great discord. As we begin, friends, I just want to name at the top that we know that this country is a great country that has many merits and holds many virtues, and we should celebrate those things. But we also have to remember that this country was also built on a class system that favored whiteness and disadvantaged people of color. That literally at a certain point in our country, it was legal to consider some voices and bodies as not just second class, but not really fully human. America is such a great society that revolutionized freedom and liberty and has propelled humanity as a whole towards building societies that are inclusive, setting us on a course for equality for all people and all backgrounds. But again, we remember, as the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg would point out, the word woman does not appear even once in the US Constitution. Or the fact that when Lazarus said those great words on the Statue of Liberty, those yearning to breathe free, there were almost 4 million legal enslaved people on this soil. And it's easy, friends. I don't want us to despair. It's easy to despair, especially today. But today I want to invite you to look at who we are, and as we heard in our introductory remarks, who we are and what we're capable of doing for humanity and honoring our ancestors and our descendants, recognizing the progress of creating human dignity. I want to invite us, even though there's so much to despair, that we should not despair, because we live in a generation that is eager to restore these sacred ideas that we created in the image of God. And so that's why I'm really excited to be here today with Rabbi Noah Arnow of Kol Rinah Congregation in Clayton, Missouri, and Pastor Carlos Smith of the Journey Church in University City. If you just Google them, you'll find plenty of inspiration on who they are and what they've, just from my meeting them and as well as reading about them. These two individuals not only speak to the values of community, solidarity, allyship, mutual support, promoting harmony and shalom, but they literally live these values and they model for us as individuals, as rabbis, as pastors, as spiritual leaders, what it means to bridge understanding, not just for the sake of understanding, but for companionship, for community, for friendship, and to heal our fractured society. So with that, Rabbi Arnow, Pastor Smith, welcome. It's good to be here with you. And as we begin our conversation, I just thought I would throw it to you to just introduce yourself and also tell us how you two met. Whoever would like to go first.
Carlos?
You want to go first, Noah? Oh, okay.
All yours.
I'll go first. Okay. Pastor Carlos Smith of The Journey here in University City, The Journey, Hanley Road. And a bit about me. I'm actually a native of Detroit. So growing up in Detroit, I actually grew up in Northwest Detroit with a lot of proximity to the Jewish community there, vibrant Jewish community there in Detroit, where I've been around, had Jewish friends my entire life. I've been pastoring here at the Journey Hanley Road for going on 3 years. It's a multi-ethnic congregation. So I actually pastor a congregation that is about 75% white, 25% African Americans and other people of color. So that's an interesting dynamic. Other than pastoring and doing those things, I also am working on, I've just entered dissertation mode. I'm hoping to do a dissertation in systematic theology. So pray for me. I need all the help I can get. And the way I met Noah, I came to The Journey. So that's how I met him. As we were
and I'm Noah Arnow, a rabbi of Kol Rinah Synagogue that, I'll tell you a little bit of that story, but I'm originally from New York. I've been here in St. Louis now for, I guess this is my 7th year. And so Kol Rinah is actually a merged congregation. And if you have two synagogues that merge into one, you wind up having 2 buildings, and most synagogues, don't need 2 buildings. So we sold one building, and then we sold the other building to a church, and actually bought that church's building. And that church was one of the locations of The Journey. And while The Journey was doing renovations in the synagogue building, and the synagogue was doing renovations in the old church building, we were all actually sharing space. So Carlos and I are actually sitting in the same building right now, socially distanced by about, 100 yards away, and lots of walls, but we're each in our offices. And our offices at our new building will be built out in a few months, so we'll be kind of moving out. But Carlos and I and our congregations have been sharing a building for 2.5, 3 years now, because construction never goes as quickly as you want. And it's really been a blessing. So that's kind of how we first met. Carlos joined The Journey just after we'd been starting to live together. And so we started to get to know each other a little bit.
Wow. Even just hearing a little bit about your congregations, I wish I had like the visuals, and I'm sure there's plenty of things on your websites, but I know that your congregations are lucky to have both of you. And it is also interesting to think about how people meet. Sometimes it's intuitive or it's natural. Sometimes we're put in environments where we're given opportunities. And I know that the two of you not only share a space, but you journeyed together, friends Google. You journeyed together and you were able to go to the Holy Land. I would love to hear like a little bit of how that even came to be. Yes, there's something to be said, again, about community relations, having some harmony, making sure that we could keep each other in mind. And as we heard from our opening introductions, what are the common ground, 3 things we could work on? But to journey 6,000 miles together is a whole other statement. And to journey in general, to remind us that we are on a journey together is also something. So can you tell us about this trip a little bit and how it came to be?
Yeah, I'll say just a word about that. It was, I think, put together by the Israel Action Network, if I remember correctly, which was a subdivision of JFNA, and they were bringing together pairs of African American pastors and rabbis from different places in America to go to Israel together. So I got this call, would I like to go? And I said, sure, but only if I can go with Carlos. And they had to confer a little bit. And they said, that'll be fine. And then I called Carlos and said, you can go into Israel together? And Carlos, what did you say?
Oh yeah, I say yeah. That interaction was actually pretty funny because I was actually downstairs in my office. His office is in another part of the building, and I think I was in the middle of the meeting. He was like, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something. Can you come up to my office and talk to me?" And so I'm thinking like, "Oh my goodness, what have we done? Have we done something offensive?" Or so I'm thinking okay, what hope. And at this point, for context, me and Noah hadn't spent a lot of time together at this point, so we had lunch maybe and. So yeah, he asked me, and I when I went up, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this is good news. Absolutely, I would love to go to Israel." So yeah, that was how that trip came about.
And we wound up. We shared a room together for however 8 nights, and I'll just say that we spent more time talking than we did sleeping. I consumed more coffee on that trip than I ever have in my life, because we really just couldn't stop talking to each other and exploring and asking questions and being curious. And I will say, not arguing, not at all. That was not part of the conversation at all. It was really just curiosity and interest and friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds, Pastor Carlos, when you were speaking, when Rabbi Noah came to you, you had this question mark. You're like, is he being legit right now? Is this happening? Is this that question? And I think it's maybe a subtle thing, but I think it's actually something that, and Rabbi Noah, you were also saying we didn't even fight at all. There's sometimes questions we ask of each other when we're building relationships across dialogue, across difference, that it's just wait, and there's a moment where we have to code switch, right? And think about wait, is this real? Are we being real right now? And I just want to say to both of you, to me, it's such a profound lesson of what do real relationships, authenticity when building relationships and across difference. So it sounds like really, you two model that. On the note of the trip, I don't want to make assumptions. Had either of you been to Israel before then? And if it was your first time, or, Rabbi Noah, I don't know. I'm assuming that as a congregational rabbi, you had probably been to Israel a few times. But what about this? But again, why should I assume? You know what they say about people who make assumptions, right? So on that note, though, tell us a little, a highlight from the trip, something unique or different about the trip, and also how did it actually help you also bond and grow together?
So I'd been to Israel, many times. I'd led a lot of trips of 15-year-olds. I spent a year living there as part of rabbinical school. But I'd never been there with Christians. And I'd never been to a number of the Christian sites that we went to. And so for me, it was seeing kind of a different side of Israel. I'd seen like the Christian pilgrims who come to Israel, but like I'd never actually like done those things. There was one Sunday lunch that we had at an Italian restaurant in Bethlehem, where Pastor Joy Gallman, one of the African American pastors on the trip, she kind of preached a little bit and offered communion. And really until then, I don't think I'd ever actually had a spiritual experience in a kind of Christian space or with Christian anything. And I'm still Jewish, but it was powerful. Like God's presence was in that, the only non-kosher restaurant we ate in the entire trip. God's presence was so powerfully there. And then the other, part of it was also just an immersive experience. And, when you are eating and, living with and traveling with people, you get closer. And that was, I think, really important for Carlos and my relationship.
Mm.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Pastor Carlos, anything on that? Yeah.
Oh yeah. So it was definitely my first time going to Israel. And so that was just an incredible experience for me. I was sharing with Noah, we've talked about it a lot. For me, it made the Bible come alive in a really real way. I think one of the things I heard over there is that the land becomes your teacher, I think I heard someone say at some point. Very true for me, very true in my experience. And so I think another word that I heard a lot of was intensity. And so I experienced that as well. So yeah, going on the trip to Israel for me was absolutely, it was enriching for my faith. It was a life-changing experience. I had lots of those moments. I remember my first time at the Western Wall and, being there and going up on Golgotha's Hill and seeing the tomb and spending time on the Mount of Olives. And but one of the greatest gifts, if there was a great takeaway, was that, as Noah said, I mean, we literally, no exaggeration, we stayed up way too late just talking about ministry, life. I mean, we had a lot of those. Christians do that too. Jewish people do that too. Like we found out there were more similarities. Like, okay, like there are more similarities in our our work as pastors and rabbi than we realized. And I mean, it was just a joy. So what I would say was the big takeaway from the trip was not only the experience in the Holy Land itself, and the incredible food, by the way. Can't talk about Israel without talking about the food. I ate so great. But beyond the Holy Land and the food, I feel like I walked away with someone who's truly become my brother. And I consider Rabbi Noah my brother, like in our relationship and our friendship is incredible.
Wow, I love that. So even something that I'm hearing also from both of you as a common theme is when we are in an immersive environment, when we are, Rabbi Noah, to use your language of immersive experience, and we have exposure to each other, and we are participating together in a full embodied experience, there's something that happens in a different way. At least that's what I'm hearing from you. Then the difference between having a meeting where we come, I'll borrow language from my colleague, Imani Chapman. She's a Jew of color and works in the field of creating a more racially just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive world and Jewish community. So she uses language of, we've been armed for so many generations that with emotional baggage or trauma, different things that we need to disarm, right? We need to disarm. And sometimes we come to meetings with an agenda. We come a little bit with certain things that we need. But there's something about it, an immersive experience, I think, that, and no less to be in the land of Israel, the Holy Land, a place where literally the land, as you said, Pastor, the land speaks. The rabbis say the land gives wisdom, that walking the land, you become smarter somehow, wiser. So it's powerful to hear that. And I guess just to think, that trip was 2 years ago?
Yes.
Was it? And for me personally, I'm 32 years old. As a mixed race Jew, my life, having a black mother and a white father, has been relatively racially charged, I would say. But I would also say in my life, these last 5 years have been the most racially charged years, at least in my lifetime. And I would argue many would probably say the same thing. And so the current challenges that we're living in, how has your relationship actually supported fostering stronger relations And how has this trip, since the trip, with we know a resurgence of high levels of police brutality, where there's been, yes, wearing a mask during a pandemic, but other things have been unmasked in a real way in our generation. So how has your relationship actually supported your organizing today? And what are you up to today in that way?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. Well, I would say that obviously, the last 5 years, African American have been, and I'm just a little older than you. I'm 37, and my 37 years, I'm not eternally old, right? But I'm not, 20 something either. I'm like, man, I've never seen such things. And from the things that have happened to the American community, what I can say is that I reached out to Noah, for example. We recently had a visual here in St. Louis for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and I reached out and I talked to Noah, and Noah was right there, right by my side. And it was a crowd of mostly Africans and my personal rabbi right there. And he stood with me there, and I'm still with the Black community. And I think his presence just communicated something to our community, and definitely to me personally as my friend, to know that his presence was there. And we sought to do the same thing, something I've sought to do when we had the I believe it was the Tree of Life tragedy in Pennsylvania, I believe it. I sought to just offer just words of solidarity as an African American. I can recall when we've had those types of tragedies, such as the Charleston shooting and people entering your sacred place and perpetrating violence, and how important it was for the African American community to have our friends of a variety of denominations, ethnicities, faith traditions stand with us. And so what we sought to do is I sought to stand with them and just say, like, hey, man, I'm here, and just let them know. But yeah, I would say our personal relationship when our communities have experienced moments of tragedy, moments of loss, moments of hate, and things of that nature, our personal friendship it becomes very personal. It's not just when I see violence and anti-Semitism and things against Jewish people in synagogue, it's not abstract. There's a synagogue in my church, and these are my friends, and it could happen here. And Noah is my friend, so it becomes very personal.
And I'll just say, for my congregation, when Carlos came to services on the Saturday after the attack in Pittsburgh, it was so powerful. And it wasn't because of what Carlos, said, although he spoke, I think, briefly and beautifully, but it was just your presence there, and knowing that, we had a friend and a pastor in you. And I'll say too, Carlos and I did a conversation on Zoom a couple of weeks after George Floyd was killed. And we had about, 60, 70 members of both of our congregations together. And, Carlos, talks a little bit about what it's like to be the Black pastor of a mostly white church. He's also, in certain ways, occasionally the Black pastor of a synagogue too. And it's not a paid job, not a paid gig, but we are very, very lucky and grateful just to have his presence and his voice. And because he can say things to my congregation that I can't say to them. And his lived experience is different than mine. And so I'm really, really grateful for what you're able to bring to us, and also for all that I've learned just from our breakfasts and coffees and lunches, long lunches, over the last couple of years. We've talked a lot about, just for example, schooling, and I've gotten kind of, a little bit of the like a sense of what the internal conversation in the African American community is on all kinds of things, and that's been a real gift. Wow.
Yes. A few lessons I'm hearing, like very much when you have a relationship already, when things emerge as societal issues, you already have a channel to be in relationship, to be of support. The power of showing up for one another. It's also a really powerful lesson. And I also want to say, like, as we're here together, I recognize that the headlines over the last several months have actually have continued to actually divide in many ways. This alliance that is already, as we know, century old, but then also has splintered in different ways, I would say, when it comes to Black Jewish alliances, Black and Jewish, Black Jewish alliances, depending, right? And so I wonder, like, what are the kind of things that you are experiencing and seeing in the broader national landscape that you want to speak to for our audience? That how do we deal with this divisiveness or a lost sense of unity or common bond to wipe out hate? What are the kind of things that you would share with people in our generation who are sensing a sense of despair or don't see a bridge or are confused about anti-Semitism, Black anti-Semitism? What are these terms, right? I'm just curious, like, what would you say on these things?
Carlos, I know you have a couple of thoughts about this.
I got a few. What I would say is when we're thinking about how we work together, I think it's important that we have to one of the things, I'm a Christian pastor, Noah's a rabbi. We both agree very much on the first page of Genesis Bible that we're all in the image of God. And so I think our starting place when we talk about not seeing a bridge, I think it's important that we start on the places of where's there common ground and where can we agree and work together. And I think there's a lot more overlap than our current culture will give us credit for. I think our differences are being exacerbated by a variety of factors. But when I think about ways that we can work together, I think when there is an assault on Black lives or Jewish lives and things of this nature, I think we can all agree that fellow image bearers, people who bear the image of God, who are losing their lives due to hate and discrimination. And so, for example, there's like conversation today about the Black Lives Matter movement, and should we align with the organization and versus the movement and all these conversations? What I would say is that I think it's important that we be what a Christian theologian named Francis Schaeffer would talk often about co-belligerence. And that means that we have to be able to partner on things and areas that we can both stand for. So when we think about, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm a Christian of the more traditional stripe theologically. And so there are certain perspectives that I have that in terms of the organization may not necessarily line up because of my traditional Christian values. But the rallying cry to value lives that have historically, Black lives, people that look like, that have historically literally enshrined in the Constitution, thank God it was amended. But, in its original inception, I was 3/5 of a person. When we look at those lives who were systematically through Jim Crow and segregation, who didn't even receive proper civil rights until the 60s, when these lives are being discriminated against, I think we all have to partner together to confront those issues, because the bottom line is it might be Black lives today that we're arguing about, but it can very quickly be Jewish lives and other people. And so I believe we should, even if we're like, man, I got some issues, or maybe the platform of the organization, I think when we think about the rallying cry and the cry of Black lives, actually, I mean, I'm saying this as a pretty no-nose, as I'm a pretty traditional Christian, that is a cry of the image of God, image bearer, our all human beings being valued. And so when we talk about Black Lives Matter and that platform, I think that's something that we can get behind, even if we're like, I'm afraid of some of the other views, but we can affirm where we agree, which is the value of human life. So that'd be my thoughts.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I'm with you. I don't have anything to add to that. The only other thing I'll say, just to go back to Rabbi Isaiah's question about kind of history and where we see ourselves going forward, is that, Jews are raised on this image of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who's like every single book I have on my bookshelf here, not right behind me, but on the side over here. And he taught at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, where I was ordained in New York. And he marched with Dr. King. He had, this picture of the lei, the flower, necklace around him. It's this iconic, beautiful image. And I find myself wondering, all right, so why was he the only professor, the only rabbi from that seminary marching with Dr. King? So when we tell the story of Jews who were partners with African Americans, there's very much a story to tell. And there's also a really big story to tell about Jews who were not active partners in the struggle for civil rights. We're telling the stories of exemplars and of elites, not of necessarily a kind of the mainstream. And that's something really important, that is something that I kind of sit with and live with, trying to figure out. So how will history remember me? Not that I deserve a place in history, but what will I say to my grandchildren when they ask me, where was I in the civil rights struggles of, the 2010s, the 2020s? So I moved to St. Louis. My first Shabbat, my first Saturday, serving as a rabbi of Kol Rinah, Michael Brown was shot. And so I know where I was when he was shot, and where was I afterwards? And I marched a little bit, but I was also finding my way and uncomfortable and challenged and trying to learn my congregation. And I'm still trying to sort this all out. And this is hard. And I feel like I'm never quite doing enough, which perhaps is precisely the point.
I'm just letting that sink in a little. And I want to just, again, thank the ADL for hosting. And I encourage that, on the note of what Rabbi Noah shared, I think there's some deeper learning, right? The continued learning, historical context. What is the story that has been told until now? What is the full story? Is it the full story? Is it a chosen, picturesque story? Is it a story? And where are we going? And what story do we want to tell? It's super profound as we think about these needs, and also just Pastor Carlos, as you shared, really recognizing that there are sometimes these core issues that could divide us, right? We think of Black Lives Matter or other movement ecology around racial justice, thinking about the Nation of Islam or other forms of hate groups, that we know there's a lot there that rightfully so we need to address. And at the same time, the fact that you brought us to page 1 of Genesis, and to keep coming back to that. Because, again, it's like doing push-ups today, to look at another person and be reminded that page 1 of Genesis. Like, I love how you phrase that. I'm totally with you. I wanted to ask another question. For me, it's like kind of the elephant in the room for me. And, when I hear the term Black-Jewish relations, I cringe a little bit, to be honest. As a mixed-race Jew, and as someone who identifies as a Jew of color, as someone, as I mentioned before, my background, it's hard for me to identify with the term because I'm not sure where in the equation I fit. One of the jokes thrown around by Jews of color that's not so funny is, so you want me to talk to myself? So it's kind of like, it's a dual question. First, I'll ask Rabbi Arnow, and then Pastor Smith, I'll have a question for you as well. Like when it comes to race relations, what would you tell folks around like looking within? And you were starting to speak to this, like really, as a Jewish community, we need to, Zachor Yemot Olam Binu Shnor Dor Vador. This is a line from the Torah, right? You should remember, you should understand the context and how you came into the world, right? So, and also looking within. And so on the note of Black-Jewish relations, race relations in the Jewish community, outside of the Jewish community, what would you say about, the voices of Jews of color as it relates to building a community, building a world of true alliance and bridge building?
Jewish communities have not done a good enough job at noticing and listening to the different voices and people in their communities. There are and have been Jews of color in Jewish communities for a long time, and they don't get noticed. Sometimes that's probably intentional. They kind of want to fly below the radar, and that's probably because they feel uncomfortable otherwise. But we need to do a much better job of lifting them up and recognizing the diversity that's already in our congregations and communities. And I would say too, though, we need to like look inside and look internal. But it can be really easy to only look inside and never have to like step outside. So I don't want, at least for my synagogue, trying to lift up and notice the Jews of color who are here to distract us from the work that also needs to be done outside the walls of our congregation too. So it needs to be both. And I think one can also support the other very much too.
I'm into that, and thank you. Definitely one could support the other, and definitely the idea of a dual approach. I'm with you. And Pastor Smith, I'm saying this also to our audience and a reminder for all of us. We know that racial constructs are fake. They're human made, but we know that there are real implications around racism, right? That race actually has real implications for people. And the Jewish people have always been racially and ethnically diverse. It's a part of who we are in our makeup. And I'm reminding all of us, including myself, growing up in Muncie, New York, ultra-Orthodox community, homogeneously white. So on the note of Jews of color or Black Jews and Jews of color as a term, friends, really you could either translate as or define as non-white, whatever that might mean, people of color non-white, or according to the U.S. Census, thinking about Black, African-American, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American. But on the note of Jews of color and Black Jews, when it comes to bridge building and bridging gaps that exist between Jewish and Black alliances, Jewish Black alliances and communities, what do you see as one of the roles of Jews of color in this work nationally and also locally?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they are in a very unique place to build bridges in that way. Walking through Kol Rinah and seeing an African-American woman, and I assumed she was one of my parishioners that I didn't know. And she's like, I'm a Jew, I go to the synagogue. I'm like, I am so sorry. This is so embarrassing. I thought she was a member I hadn't met. So some of the fun of sharing the synagogue spaces, one of the things that can happen. But it led to some interesting conversations, and so I think there's a role for bridge building. And for me, as to be candid, as a African American, as a Black man, one of my greatest joys was going to Israel and seeing the ethnic diversity of the Jewish people there. And we spent a couple days with the Ethiopian Jews there and seeing people who looked a whole lot like me. And it was refreshing. Now, the other side of it was that it's also grievous at the same time, because it was fun to go there and see, but to also see how their neighborhood looked a lot like an underserved neighborhood could here in America. How spaces that I entered in, that they seem to be less well off than some of the other white Jews that I've seen. And so it was simultaneously like, wow, to go to Israel and see people who look like me in the land and to see them there, and then to see, wow, but you seem to be marginalized just like I am. And to hear, I recently read some articles from Jews of color talking about how they are careful to make sure that they wear a star, or when they're out in Jewish spaces, or how they've been approached and people thought they were the help, the there to serve food or something. And so it's encouraging, because I think they are in a unique place to serve as bridge builders between African Americans and the African diaspora around the world and the Jewish community. So there's a uniqueness there to live in both worlds. But also, it breaks my heart that, wow, even in the Jewish community, there's still some marginalization. It's still that their voices are not elevated, even within in a smaller culture. So it kind of cuts both ways.
Mm. Wow. Yes. It also, as you share that, I've spent 2 years studying in yeshiva in Israel. I've staffed 7 birthright trips to Israel. I very much identify as a Zionist, and also I very much recognize that some of the products of Western society and Western civilization, unfortunately, also has structural racism in certain respects. And I know that we're progressing. We live in the 21st century, 2020. Friends, there's big opportunities here. But Pastor Carlos, I want to just also remind us, like you were just saying, that racism, unfortunately, is really in many ways everywhere. It's in the water. It's as they say. It's something that that no one's immune to in certain respect, to live with a racially oriented lens. And so I'm with you when you describe what you're describing. And I think, like, friends, as we have this conversation, I feel like we could have full seminars on each of the questions that we asked today. And both of you are just, I'm super inspired. As I do my work through Jewish Federations of North America, my job is to spearhead our JEDI initiative. JEDI stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And when I think of people who are inspiring me to recognize what's happening in the world, I do have both of you in mind, and I'm super grateful that we have this time together. I want to ask you, as we come to the top of our hour, I want to ask you just 2 shorter questions. One is, and maybe a little bit different. First and foremost, what's a book that captures your relationship, not only to community building, but what's something that you're reading now or that you would recommend that really promotes what you two have shown us today, that really promotes this idea of human bridging, connection, and also recognizing the things that need to get done in order to get us there. Is there even one book that captures what you are up to and what we discussed today? Throw us anything. We already quoted Genesis 1, so that's a good book.
So, pastor and rabbi, we're going to say the Bible.
Yeah, we quoted Genesis 1 and you quoted Genesis 32, if I remember correctly, Rabbi Isaiah. Deuteronomy 32, I mean. So I would say actually the Bible is actually, fruitful, in terms of books. When Carlos and I have time and we're sitting and talking, chances are, and we're not preparing for this call, chances are we're actually talking Bible. Occasionally New Testament, often Hebrew Bible, because, I don't have a whole lot to add about the New Testament. But talking about holidays and stuff. So, that is really material over which we can bond and share. And it's also something we're both, intimately familiar with. One of the things I love about Carlos is, Carlos reads through the Bible every year. And so, we'll see each other and he'll be like, oh yeah, I was just in towards the end of Exodus. And it's not the same cycle that we're on, but we always have Bible to talk. And I'll say he really can give me and most Jews lessons on the prophets, because we don't really read the prophets. So I got some homework.
Beautiful.
I'm sorry. What?
Oh, no, please.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I was going to say, I kind of said it tongue-in-cheek jokingly, but we really do talk a lot of Bible. And I will say that Noah has man, he's made me a better preacher. I actually purchased a copy of the Great Scriptures, and I use it in my preaching.
Wow, look at
it. And so it's fascinating to me. It's absolutely fascinating to me. I read that. I was reading so much Jewish material at one point that Facebook started giving me ads for building my own sukkah during the feast. So I think I was like Googling it quite a bit. Wait a minute. But I would say, yeah, like seriously, it's been, I would say for like those who are students of Scripture, I do think there's a benefit for Christian and Jewish people to read the Bible together and to have discussions. And of course, there are things that we don't see the same way. Of course, there's that. But I also think I feel that my faith has actually been enriched with my conversation with Noah. So I would say I think it's good to read the scriptures together. And I would also say another book beyond the scriptures I would encourage is actually a book by Ta-Nehisi Coates called Between the World and Me. And this is coming from an American. If you're just like, if you don't have much proximity to African Americans and you're trying to like, man, kind of see the world through that lens. Again, no one of us, I know just like Jewish people, no one Jewish person can speak for the Jewish world. Ta-Nehisi can't speak for, all 40 million African Americans here. But it's a powerful lens. Between the World and Me is a great read. He's an incredible writer. And Ta-Nehisi talks about his experience as a man growing up in America and going to college and all these things. And I believe that book, in many ways, Noah talked about the internal dialogue and sometimes the things that you feel, the angst just as being a Black person in America. I think if you're like trying to get an on-ramp to see, man, what might be going on in some of my African-American neighbors' heart and mind, Between the World and Me is a great place to start. And I would encourage you to have some dialogue with some folks after you read it. It's quite stirring.
Wow. This has been quite the soul talk. I love that we were able to join together in the way that we have today to hear and to be inspired to take action in our communities the way you have shown us. And the conversation doesn't need to stop here. I think that there's continued learning, as we just heard, whether it's through scripture and the Bible, the Torah. Hora'ah, it means to illuminate or to guide us, as we've already heard from our clergy, or continue learning Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me. Friends, you know where to Google to find other ways. Continue what you gained today, the questions that you are leaving with. These are questions that I hope you'll continue the journey along with our leadership. So with that, friends, we should be blessed to build a world from love, one that sees the soul, the image of God within one another, and we should be blessed to stand up even in the face of discomfort or despair, and to recognize and to remind each other the way both Pastor Carlos and Rabbi Noah have reminded us that we truly have each other's back and that we truly are coming from a common source of Adam and Eve. And with that, we'll see you next time.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.